If you have a Bible, you can take it out and turn to Exodus chapter 20. Open up to the 10 Commandments. We are in a series called Rest Up. We are talking about the idea of Sabbath and the idea of rest and how this is a gift for us from God. And so we're going to read this command, which is the lengthiest command in the 10 Commandments. And we're going to spend the next few minutes kind of diving into what this means for God's people, the Israelites, and how that transfers to us. So Exodus 20, starting in verse 8, says, "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall work and do all you... 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or your sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." Let's pray. Father, we thank you for tonight. Thank you that all of the things you commanded us to do, one of them is to stop and rest. God, we confess it is probably the commandment that we break more than all the other 10. So Lord, I pray that you would help shape us tonight through your Spirit, through your scriptures, that we become people who enter into this godly divine rhythm, Lord, work and rest of Sabbath. Lord, let us know what that means to 2018 and the following Christ. We're listening, God. You speak to our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Well, this is our second week. We're only going to do one more. It's kind of a short series, but I think it's an important one. Not just because I think so, because I think God is pretty serious when it comes to the Sabbath and his rest. And I said this last week, I'll say it again. This is something that I am wrestling with. This is something that I am trying to enter into as a follower of Jesus, but something I do not have mastery over. There have been seasons where I've done Sabbath really well. This is not one of those. This is maybe one of the busier seasons I've had in recent memory. I mean, this is, we just moved yesterday to Encinitas. So packing boxes and moving and all that goes on with this, the remodel is going on here at the church. And just everything's swirling around our life. This series coming at this time could not be better and also more frustrating. So whatever season you're in, if you're in a busy season, I hope that you would let this just push against the rhythm that you might be running, the pace that you might be running, to see what you have for us. And so, and like I said, for me, this has been an interesting week. So we moved yesterday. Tuesday, I went to the doctor. Just kind of been having some abdominal pain in the past couple months. I have an abdominal tear, and which whatever that means. So when I prayed for God to give me a ripped stomach, this was not what I had in mind. So be specific when you pray. So the doctor, I said, "But what does that mean?" And he's like, "Well, you don't need to have surgery. That's the good news." He said, "But you just need to rest." I'm like, "Funny." So cool, God. Make me lie down for your pastors. And so I'm like, "So what can I not do?" He's like, "Well, you shouldn't, do like kind of like squats or anything like kind of heavy lifting." And like, "So like moving?" He's like, "Yeah, don't move." I'm like, "Oh, I'm moving on Saturday." It's like, okay. So thank the Lord, some guys and girls from the church came and helped us move. I actually had this moment. I was loading up my bike, the last thing on the truck, just like stuffed full to the brim, and I stepped back with the bike and literally placed my foot where I thought was on the ground, and there's nothing there. So I started falling off the truck. Okay, just fully like, I'm like, I'm just gonna eat this so hard right now. And John Hall, who goes to this church, I don't know if he's here or not, and I don't know how he did this, what kind of workouts he's doing, but literally caught me and laid me down. I was like, and there's like 4 or 5 guys standing around watching this, and all of them like just look around, they're like jaw dropped, like how did you do that? And John's face like, I don't know. like how that happened. So we just concluded either like John's like, one of those crazy like superheroes is hiding his powers, or angels were involved, or both. But needless to say, we're done moving. Now I get to start my healing tomorrow. So hopefully that will go well. But again, I just think it's so like, wow, you're really not letting me get away from this. Like this is a time to rest. And so tonight we're going to be kind of taking a interesting look, because last week we talked about Genesis, right? The very beginning of creation. There's no laws, there's no scripture. There's just a God and Adam and Eve and his people, and they are, and in this moment, their very first day of existence is rest. We just talked about Sabbath as a gift. Well, tonight, the next time we see Sabbath come up in Scripture is when the people of God, the Israelites, who started out as a very small nation, really a family, they started growing and growing, and then found themselves in Egypt, and ended up staying in Egypt, and they went from being there peaceably to being actually forced to stay there as slaves as they grew in numbers and they were more afraid of them. And so they ended up being in Egypt for over 400 years. I mean, think about that. Like, the United States has not been around. The Declaration of Independence was not signed that long ago. And think about how deep our cultural identity is as the United States. 400 years. When all you know, and your parents knew, and your grandparents and your grandparents, all you have known is oppression and slavery. And in that, they're crying out because through their oral tradition, they've heard about this God. They don't have a name for him. They've heard about this God who promised these people a land, a promised land. And through this, they begin to cry like, well, are you real? Where are you, God? And God hears their cry and sends them this deliverer named Moses, this reluctant deliverer. Well, Moses has this incredible story where he goes back and forth with Pharaoh, reveals God, Yahweh's mighty power, crosses the Red Sea, and starts them on their journey to their promised land. And as they're going, this people that have only known slavery realize they have no government, they have no laws, they have no leader, and they've just become a nation with a theocracy. God is their king. And God begins to do what every government does. It begins to give them a constitution. He begins to give them laws. And this is where we find the Ten Commandments. This is how you are to live as God's people. And as this is happening, he gives them this command that we just read. You are to remember. This word is very important. That's their command. You have to remember this Hebrew word zekar. Remember the Sabbath. Remember to rest. And we look at that like, man, that seems legalistic. But remember, he's speaking to a nation that has only known slavery, only known working, just back-breaking labor 7 days a week for their entire life. And they meet their new king, their God. And he says, remember to rest. You have to rest. You have to stop. And this is where we get this tension, because you would think that the people would be like, finally! It's been about time. This is not how they respond to Sabbath. And this is where we're going to find ourselves in the story. And the reason why we're going to be studying about Israel's relationship with the Sabbath is because we are Israel. When you read Israel in Scripture, when you read the Old Testament, it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, they struggle. No. Israel is a character type for who we are. Isn't that funny? We've been given the Sabbath rest too, yet we don't know what to do with it either. And so we're going to look at Israel's story and the unique stuff, and we're going to look at our own story and see, man, what are we missing? So 3 things that I just want to kind of lay before you that we're going to be talking about. So number 1, Sabbath helps us remember who he is, but he meaning God. Sabbath helps us, reminds us who God is. When we remember, when we zekar the Sabbath, it reminds us of who God is. Number 2, when we Sabbath, it helps us remember who we are. Who am I? That can come only in the unique practice of Sabbath. And lastly, Sabbath actually helps us remember who others are as well. So we've been looking at these 3 different elements we find in Israel's kind of coronation as a nation, as they become God's people, and they leave slavery into the promised land, and how God shapes them. So, number one, Sabbath helps us remember who He is. So if you guys have your Bible, turn over a couple books over to Deuteronomy chapter 5. We start in verse 12. And if you notice, this is a retelling of the Ten Commandments. This is at the end of Moses' life. He's kind of recapping all that's been written down. And he writes down the commandment a little bit different. He doesn't say remember the Sabbath. He says observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. As the Lord your God has commanded you, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord our God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your town, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Then verse 15. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath. So as he's giving them this command, reminding them of this command, he says, remember who you were. Remember how God found you. And I love the word. Remember that it was the Lord your God who brought you out, which is implying you did not rescue yourself. When we Sabbath, it is a statement to our soul and those around us that we are not God. And He is. He is the one who has brought us out of slavery and into new life. But it is not us. It is not our own doing. Matt Chandler, who's a pastor in Texas, says it like this. Sabbath exists to remind us of the power and presence of God, and to woo us away from self-reliance. I love that. To woo us away from self-reliance and into dependence on God's power and presence. And he's speaking to his people, and all they've known is their own strength. All they've known is the power of Pharaoh. And God brings them out, and as He does it, He shows them two things. That He is more powerful than they can ever imagine, and He is more gracious than they ever could have dreamt. This is what Sabbath does. It reminds us both of God's power and His grace. And he has to do that, but I would argue, if you don't stop and rest, you will not have an accurate view of God's power and grace. So my son is 2.5 years old, and he's growing in strength all the time. And also not just in like physically, but in his will, like strength of will. Like he just wants to do what he wants to do. And where this happens every single day of my life, pray for me, is when we get into the car and he wants to get himself into his own car seat. And so we get in the car, and I know it's coming, guys, and it kind of like stresses me out. So Jen's like, Jen, okay, who's doing it? And normally it's me, because I have to be physically strong enough to get him to his car. So we go in there, we begin the dialogue happen every single day, and eventually I will break him. I said, Augustine, it's time to get in your car seat. I do it, Dada. Okay, you can go in your car seat. I says, okay, and then he'll go and put it in the back of the van. I'm like, no. I said, get in your car seat. Okay, Dada, I get it. And so I go and pick him up. He's like, no, I do it. I'm like, okay. And he goes, and he pretends to get in his car seat, and then like jumps up to the driver's seat. And I'm just, right? Totally cool. Not impatient at all. And depending on what my calendar says, it is really depending on how many times I'm going to give him to figure this thing out. And he's doing better. Just to give him a better bit of that. He's learning. He's kind of getting there. But for the most part, it ends up like this. I've reached my limit. It's time to go. And I say, Augustine, this is your last chance. Get in your car seat, or I will make you get in your car seat. And he goes, no, I get in my car seat. So I'm like, okay. So I pick him up, and here it comes, right? Like the wrestling match of the century. And so I'm like pinning him down, and he's like doing this weird like jujitsu move on me. It's like, no, he literally yells out baby power. Like as I'm doing it, he goes, a kid does, he's like, baby power! What? Where did that come from? Baby power! And he's like flexing every muscle that he is, and I get there, and he's like flailing, and he's like, no, I do it. I'm like, I gave you a chance. I'm like trying to reason with the 2-year-old. As I'm doing this, he just yells like, no, baby power. And I click it in. And I'm like, out of breath. And I shut the door, and he's screaming at me. I don't even turn around and look at him. I'm like, that's right. Just walk away. Don't you forget. Baby power. I got dad strength. You know about that? I don't think so. Every day of my life, I entered into this wrestling match with my son over his car seat. And I was doing that this week in the midst of studying for this message. And I was reminded that Sabbath is when we stop wrestling. Sabbath is when we stop trying to convince God we are stronger than we are. And we are reminded that He is stronger than us. And we release that. Okay, God, you can do more when I rest than when I do everything in my best strength. It's how powerful you are. Not only are you powerful, but you're gracious. Like when I pin my son in my car seat, I'm using physical force, but I'm not hurting my son. Trying to. I love my son. And I'm actually doing it for his benefit. Because I don't want him to get injured. Right? And the power and the grace as a father is just this picture of God saying, no. You have to Sabbath. You have to remember who I am. The second thing that Sabbath helps us remember is who we are. It helps us remember who God is, right? His power and His strength. It also helps us remember who we are. So listen to this. Turn back to Exodus chapter 16. This is the very first time we see Sabbath mentioned after the garden. The very first time. Now listen to where it comes in the story. I love this. So they get into the desert, right? They left Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea, and they're in a hot desert. What's the very first thing they start complaining about? Water, right? And so they're like, where's water? And they're complaining, and Moses talks to God, and he strikes a rock, water comes up, great, they have water. They're fine for a couple hours. And then they realize we have no food. And so they start complaining about food, and so God does another miracle, and all of a sudden they wake up one morning, and there is this bread-like substance on the ground, and they call it manna, which is the Hebrew word for what is it, literally. And so they start to gather this, and they bake it, and they boil it, and that becomes their food. And every morning, they have food every morning, and they have water that comes with them. And so the basic human needs, I love this, the basic human needs are provided. You know the very next thing that God gives the people of Israel? Rest. Water, food, rest. For God, this is not a negotiable issue. This is at the very core of what it means to be human, is when we rest. So Exodus 16, starting verse 21, says, each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed. This talk about manna. And when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came in to report this to Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord's commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning. So they saved it until morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is the Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. Now listen to this. Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day He gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out. So the people rested on the 7th day. I love this imagery because God brings Israel out of Egypt, but now He has to bring Egypt out of Israel. Right? He has to change how they think because this is your first day off in years. And what do? They go back to work. Because overworking is not a sign of freedom but of slavery. And you might not have a past of being enslaved to an Egyptian regime, but I guarantee you have your own masters that you bow down to with your calendar. And so they find themselves going out and they look for it and there's nothing there. Sound familiar? I'm working and nothing is happening. I can't seem to find enough time in the day. And so pastorally, this is what I'd like to bring to you. Again, I'm not speaking that God is trying to remind us of the past life where we were freed from in the physical sense of slavery, but I do believe that there is an oppressive force upon our generation, upon the church. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but I believe two things that are actively attacking our spiritual health are hurry and technology. Both which are not bad things if done in the proper way. Hurry, speed, performance are great things. Technology can be a gift. But I believe both of these things have been so consumed and welcomed into our lives that they now own us at a certain level. Let me explain how. So just a quick story before I dive into some points. My daughter Zoe, she's 10 years old, our oldest. I remember when she was born, I had this incredible fear come over me, like, oh my gosh, I have a daughter, and there are boys out there like me. And I just was like, dear God, help her be like Jen. You know, Jen didn't date anyone until she's like a senior in college. Isn't that not the dream for like every dad? Like, yes, God, that's what I want. So when she's 10 years old and she's getting like taller and more beautiful, and I'm just like, this is not good. This is not good. I don't have a gun. Like this is a problem. And but this year's God's grace shone upon my family when she got really interested in science. Guys, she skips Monday lunch to go to a science elective class where they do experiments. And I'm like, there's a God in heaven. He loves me. She's like, Dad, there's like no girls in there. There's just like, a bunch of guys. And if they do cool experiments, she's like, I think I'm going to join band. I'm like, good, join band. Go get another book, here's another book, it's bigger. I mean, I'm just like, yeah, just pushing the nerd thing on her, right? So, but she came to me and she's starting to come up with these inventions, and she's like, Dad, I know my first real invention is. I'm like, I'm like, what? She's like, I'm going to invent a cell phone battery that never dies. And I was like, that's actually a brilliant idea. And I'm like, how are you going to do that? She like has this like paper. She's like, well, I think if batteries are kind of like, maybe like a U shape, but we could make them like in a circle shape. Maybe they could like just never stop going in, like, like a 10-year-old brain. She's like coming up with it. I'm going to encourage you. This is brilliant. I'm like, what? I'm like, where did you come up with this idea? And she's like, well, I always see how mad you and Mom get when your phones die. So, you are investing your 10-year-old imaginative self into solving the world problem of us not having our phones more. That's the cue she's picked up from us. And I was actually kind of disturbed, and she obviously didn't know, and encouraged, like, you're brilliant, like, keep going, keep going, be a nerd. But for me, I stopped and like, my daughter views the world problem she finds herself needing to solve is we need more phone. Mom and Dad are upset when they don't have their phone. And man, it's just like a gut check, right? It's like, oh. And I came across a couple of great lectures this week that were really provocative for me. One was by John Mark Comer, and he's talking about the evolution of time. And he talked about the invention of the clock. He said the original clock in the 6th century was invented by monks, and for hundreds of years they're the only ones who used clocks, and they used it for fixed hour prayer. And around 1300s, 1367 I think, in Cologne, Germany, the very first public clock was erected, and hence was the introduction of artificial time. And so they began to tell people this is when time is, because before that point, everyone just used the sun and the moon and seasons to tell us what time it is. And this is the first time it said this. And then it kind of took another turn in the 1800s when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. This is the first time in human history that you could go to bed or wake up whenever you wanted based on the clock you have been given, not on the sun that was rising and setting. And then it begins to take another turn in the 1900s when the Industrial Revolution begins to peak, and all of these time-saving devices are introduced, like the car, and the train, and the plane, and the mail service, and grocery stores. And all of a sudden, things that take you weeks and months take you days. Things that used to take you an hour would take you a minute. And then it begins to progress as technology is introduced into our lives. And you think about 2007, when everything turned. Right, when the iPhone was introduced, when Facebook and Twitter went public as companies, and our technological era, as we know it, was birthed. And I can't help but wonder how this progress of our understanding of time has actually seeped into our understanding of God. And before, when you would pray for something, you would wait for months to see if your harvest would come in. Now, if God doesn't answer your prayer in 2 weeks, you think that He's not heard you. We see in the Old Testament God promising something to Abraham and Sarah and then waiting 25 years, and it's like they don't even blink an eye. But we have such a warped view of time, such a controlled, choked out view of time, that somehow that has made God turn out to be cruel or some sort of broken vending machine we can't get to work for us. And God is screaming to us, not the Israelites, the 2018 followers of Jesus of Nazareth, stop. Just stop. Don't hurry through your life and miss how good God is and how human you are and how that is a beautiful reality. I was listening to a podcast by Simon Sinek, who's kind of this leadership guru, and he's talking about technology. He's talking about how this new world of technology is kind of taken over this generation, and psychologists I have a feel they're trying to figure out what are the implications here. And one of the things that they've discovered across the board is that every time we get a text message or a like, it releases a little bit of dopamine in our brain. And as the dopamine is released, it feels good, it has an addictive quality to it. This is the same chemical that's released with alcohol, drugs, and sex, with gambling. And what we have found is when those things are introduced, like that dopamine is introduced to young people before in their adolescence, or especially their prepubescent, is that they become much more stronger, much more likely to become addicted to them. So most alcoholics started drinking when they were teenagers. Most people were addicted to gambling had some sort of history with that kind of risk and adrenaline when they were younger. And we have now given technology these dopamine dispensers without limits to people younger and younger and younger. I mean, Zoe is the only 5th grader in her class that does not own a cell phone. And you have to sit back and you have to think, we have never had the ability to do more with the time we have, and we have never felt more short of time. This is why John Mark Comer says, our problem is time, but the solution is not more time. Dallas Willard is an amazing theologian, one of my favorite authors. He was the head of the philosophy department at USC. He was interviewed by Relevant Magazine about technology and Sabbath and this practice, which you'll hear a lot about silence and solitude, this idea of just stopping, being quiet. And he was interviewed, and I just wanted to read you an excerpt from his interview that I thought was really interesting. It's a little long, but stick with me, I think it's really important. He says, you have to think in terms of radical disciplines that will return them out of this world of distraction they're living in and help them find the center. And those are solitude and silence. You have to take yourself out of the place of running your world. And there is nothing that I know that can do that other than the practice of lengthy solitude and silence. That will allow you to begin to understand what Sabbath means. But most people can't approach Sabbath because they're so revved up and distracted by so many things that they couldn't even begin to think about it. Once you begin to experience solitude and silence, you discover that you actually have a soul and that there is a God. Then you can begin to practice Sabbath and will be able to re-enter community. You can't have community without Sabbath. You know, psychology today has come up that there's actually something called hurry sickness. It's quoted saying hurry sickness is a condition in which a person feels chronically short on time and so tends to perform every task faster and get frustrated when encountering any kind of delay. President. The danger in our fast-paced society is not only that we have forgotten the power and the grace of God, the problem is we have forgotten who we are. We've forgotten that we are human with limits, and that is a gift. We've forgotten that we were made to rely on God, and if we cannot stop for a moment to realize that, then we will lose ourselves. A.J. Swoboda says, for Jews, forgetting the Sabbath was akin to forgetting one's entire identity. A Jew forgetting the Sabbath was like an Israelite who was raised by Pharaoh. While Christians are going to enter the Sabbath in a unique way, listen to this, to remember the Sabbath is to remember who we are. Children born of grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. Remember who we are. Remember who He is. Last thing I want to touch on is Sabbath helps us remember who others are. If we look at Exodus 20, verse 8 through 11 again, this is the very first verse we read tonight. Listen to the wording, it's pretty interesting. It says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall not labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, listen, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. Nobody, not even visitors. This is for everyone. Everyone is to stop. And I just think about how Sabbath is not just a gift that you're supposed to internalize. It is something that is to be shared. And every single one of you guys has the ability to help give Sabbath. So in my world, I can go and I can ask Jen, how can I help you rest? So could you take the kids for a few hours and I can just go to a coffee shop? Absolutely. Coworker, hey, can I take that shift for you? It seems like you really need just some time off. I mean, this is something that we're not only supposed to experience ourselves, it's something that we're supposed to give. This is for everyone. It even goes so, this is for your animals. I mean, give your hamster a break, you know? I think there's like a puppy here tonight. Sleeping? That's a cute dog. I'm so distracted now. And this idea that everything rests. Do you know it actually goes as far to actually saying the land itself should Sabbath? Listen to what it says in Leviticus 25, 1 through 7. I'm sure you've all memorized all of Leviticus. It says, the Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath and rest. A Sabbath to the Lord. This is huge because this is an agrarian society. You don't live unless you plant your own food. What an audacious claim. This isn't just you take a day off. Your fields take a day off for an entire year. Because that's how big God wants to be viewed. But think about this. If you're a farmer, that also means you get an entire year to rest. This is a really the first introduction of a sabbatical, like an extended period of rest. And then it goes on to say, whatever grows up in it, let it grow. Like, don't try and just like, here's a couple seeds just in case something wants to pop up to feed my family. No. It's whatever grows up. And so this is pervasive principle throughout all of it. By the way, I've seen this true. I got to work really closely with an organization called Plant with Purpose for a number of years. And this organization will go in, and they're an environmental organization that works with the rural poor throughout the world. And what they have found is 70% of the poor in the world live on farms or rural areas. 70% of the poor. We think of like cities and slums, but no, 70% are mostly farmers. And what they found is that these towns and these people are impoverished because they have a lack of education on healthy practices with the soil. One of them being rest. You have to let soil rest or else it's robbed of its nutrients. And if that's robbed of its nutrients, you're not going to produce crops. It's not going to make you money for your family. And so what will happen is if there's no rest for the soil, there's no good fruit. They'll actually start cutting down the trees to sell for firewood. It's called slash and burn. It's the quickest way to make money. And then after 2 years, they have no way to make any income at all because there's no trees, there's no healthy soil, there's been no rest. And all of a sudden, men have to leave and migrate to go make money to send back home, and there's whole villages of women and children exposed for human trafficking. Do you see how Sabbath is not just a luxury? It's not a day off. This is a matter of life and death. We have to rest. And God, in His wisdom and His love and His knowledge, is screaming for His people, you have to stop. And I think it's as hard as it was for them as it is for us. We just don't know how to do it. And so there are these things that Jewish people had introduced to their children. Some of my favorite. One is a Jewish father would give his children a spoonful of honey. By the way, you can get it at the store. This is something that was a luxury. He would give his son or daughter an entire spoonful of honey every Sabbath because he wanted him to remember how sweet it was. The wife, every Friday night as the sun went down and Sabbath began, would light this Kaddish candle. So there's 2 flames on it, one for remembering, one for obedience, right? The 2 Sabbath commands. One rabbi scholar talked about how they believe that this was actually setting the mood for lovemaking for the married couple. So here you have this culture that says only known work and essentially slave labor. Says, I want you to stop. I want you to taste the goodness of God. I want you to regain relationship. I want you to have intimacy as a married couple. I want things to go back into order. So that you can remember I am God. You are humans, and other people need rest too. So this is what I want to do before we end. So last week you had a very simple application. I just asked you, find a day, find a time. When can you Sabbath? Tonight I'm going to ask, maybe because I can do 4 hours a week. Cool, start with that. Maybe some of you guys can do 10, or some of you guys are like, I'm going to have a full 24 hours. I think that's amazing. Wherever you are, start there. But I'm going to encourage you to help actually start to form that day tonight. So there's Tim Keller, who's a pastor in New York, has, I think, a really great list of just some practical things we can think through when it comes to practicing the Sabbath. And he talks about inner practices and outer practices. So the inner practice, he says, have to be observed. If you do not practice the inner practices, then the outer practices don't matter. So the inner practices are liberation and trust. Remember, the command of Sabbath was given to a people who have only known slavery. And so the Sabbath reminds you you're free. When we rest, now we're not being reminded we're free from fear. We are free from sin. Why? He's given us new life. So when we Sabbath, we remember the freedom. Right? It's for freedom's sake that Christ has set us free. The second Sabbath inner practice is trust. When you're a farmer, you don't plant. It demands trust. When you're a programmer, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're self-employed, and you take a day off, you are losing revenue in business, but in that you're trusting that God is your provider. So these two facts, liberation and trust. The outer practices, I think these are just really good. Number one, take more time. So if you budgeted 4 hours, do 5. All right, if you're doing 12 hours, do 18. You need time. You cannot Sabbath without time. Next is have more balanced time. So the 3 things underneath that kind of tie into that. So have more balanced time. The first one is avocation. Avocation is the opposite of your vocation. So Rick Warren would say if you work with your hands, Sabbath with your head. If you work with your head, Sabbath with your hands. So for me, I work a lot with my head. Right? I'm studying and meeting with people. I'm always kind of up here. There's little physical work that I have to do. So when I Sabbath, a lot of times for me is I go outside, I'll garden, I'll surf, I'll go on a walk. And sometimes, even when it sounds weird, I think I'm going to do it. I'll literally clean a room. I'll clean just like this. I love Sabbath. But for me, there's something so satisfying for me to putting my hands to do something, start it, work hard, and see it finish good. I'm proud to see that when I work. And so, avocation. Number 2, contemplative. What you're doing right here, this is a contemplative act. You are engaging your mind. You are worshiping the Lord. You are choosing to say, okay, whether it's reading scripture or whether that is silence and solitude, it would be contemplative, purposeful. You're not just binging the whole season of Friends and calling it Sabbath, right? You do that on Wednesdays. And the third thing is being inactive. So some of you guys who are like Sabbath, God, I'm going to plan every single hour of my Sabbath, and it's going to be awesome, and so, then part is just stop. Don't plan anything. Your entire life is planned. And some of you guys don't plan at all. And God would just say, let's be intentional. Use your time wisely. Last few things. Be accountable for your Sabbath rest. So talk to someone, a friend, a coworker, a spouse, a leader, an open table host. Just say, hey, I want to be someone that practices rest and Sabbath in my life. Next, inject Sabbath time into your work. This has been my week. My week is not giving me a ton of time off, but I purposely choose to Sabbath every single day. Again, a couple days ago, I went to the park with my son, and I just watched him play, and I drank a good decaf almond milk iced latte from Lofty, and I enjoyed the sun on my skin, and I smelled the ocean breeze, and I just enjoyed God. And it didn't last all day. I just had an hour in my hands, but man, I encountered the rest of God. And so injecting Sabbath into even if you have a devotional, you elect your devotional before you go to your lunch break, and find God into those moments of rest. Then lastly, community. Do it with someone. This is maybe the hardest for me because Jen and I are so different. We Sabbath so different. And so oftentimes, when and how we Sabbath is unique, but choosing to Sabbath together. Again, maybe even your open table say, hey, what if we all shop for this window of time and we try to, intentionally engage? I don't know. But those are some things that I found. Maybe take a couple of them. Maybe you're not trying to do everyone's all things this week, but you would actually say, I'm going to engage Sabbath